Hey Spooky, hey Dan, it's great to see you guys.
Hey, how you
And thank you
doing?
so much for joining me today.
Hi, Vadim. Thank you so much for hosting us. Glad to be here.
Yeah,
Yeah,
hey,
I'm
Vadim.
excited. Hey,
Thanks for having me.
sure. And yeah, guys, for everyone who's watching this video, Spooky is a legendary AC who worked on many big films. Yes.
Thank
And also recently, he brought his skill to 28 years later. And Dan Keynes, his lens maker, innovator, cinematographer, co-founder and CEO of Atlas, and that's the company.
Also a movie fan.
Oh,
I like watching.
yeah, yeah. So I think
28.
Atlas lenses, I love them. So it's some groundbreaking lenses. I really like the look. So guys, I'm excited to talk with you. And yeah, I'm Vadim Chalenko, and I'm a founder and CEO of Beastgrip, and we make camera gear for smartphones. So the reason we are chatting today because 28 years later, which was shot on iPhone. So everyone is involved, and I'm really excited to talk with you guys because I've been watching all the interviews and articles, trying to see what information will be released. There is a lot of info about film, idea, interviews with Danny Boyle, Anthony Dodd Mantle, and very little information about the process, how it was done, because shooting on an iPhone, it's not an easy task. And in my opinion, yeah, Spooky knows. In my opinion, I love that film. I watched it twice, second time 2 days ago, and yeah, I really, really love that movie, like everything about that. And when I'm thinking that it was shot on iPhone, it's kind of blowing my mind because I cannot imagine how much work went into that, especially with so many camera rigs, so many devices. It's amazing. So, okay, where do we start? And then if you'll have any questions, just, ask Spooky because I have a bunch of questions. So I'm sure you do too.
Yeah, for me, it's really incredible to see you guys making this film and kind of pushing the boundaries of what's possible with equipment that you might not think would be usable for a Hollywood level production. And it also brings back memories for me seeing the very first 28 Days Later film. And I know that they used mini DV cameras, and I believe they were using was it a
That's
XL1
right.
or
Yeah,
XL?
XL1. Yeah.
As someone sort of at the very beginning of my career, but who always loved filmmaking as an art form and as a way of telling stories and entertaining people, at that time, it was highly inspirational to see Anthony Dodd Mantle and Danny Boyle using kind of prosumer grade equipment that would be equipment I could actually get my hands on to tell a story in a really innovative and interesting way. And I think we can kind of see a mirror image of that, over 20 years later here now. Um, and it harkens back to that time where I was just at the very beginning of my career as a camera person and thinking, wow, if these guys can make a movie like this and it's getting distribution and people love the film, that means that the equipment is no longer the barrier to entry. It's really on us to figure out how to tell a story. And so in a way, the equipment is part of the story, but it also gets out of the way of telling the story. But of course, being seasoned film veterans at this point, we know that sometimes the equipment can get in the way. So that kind of leads to my first question, which would be, how crazy was it for you to prep iPhones to make a movie? Being a film professional as yourself, what did that process and workflow look like for you, and what were some of the biggest successes that were maybe unexpected and some of the biggest challenges in terms of preparation for the film?
Yeah, I mean, just to say everything that you've said so far is absolutely true. You know, the 28 days shot on a Canon XL1, which had a Pro Cam 35 adapter to put, cinematic lenses on. It was the old spinning shutter, and sort of ironically, we fell back into a similar setup for 28 years using Beastgrip's DOF adapter. Um, I had, normally on a feature film, you would get 3-4 weeks prep, 1 week of camera test, shooting various lenses, artist tests. But yeah, this was slightly different. You know, um, I had 9 weeks of prep, and I had to kind of convince the office that that time was needed. And because you're basically rebuilding everything from scratch, it's not just a white box from the Apple store that you open up and you can shoot ready to go. This is a Danny Boyle film, an Anthony Dodmantle ADM shooting it. I've worked with them previously before, a few times. So I kind of knew what was coming my way. Uh, Originally, Danny said to me he wanted 100 iPhones. Get me 100 iPhone 15 Pros. It's like, yeah, sure, no problem. And that's a lot of money. Before you've even got lenses and map boxes or anything, crew, so that got scaled down to 55 in total. And over the 9 weeks, we had rigorously tested various other companies that dealt with cages, adapters, screw-in lenses, and ADM and myself settled with Beastgrip. Their
Thank
equipment,
you.
well, no problem. um, their equipment seemed to be more robust, and just holding the weight of the screw-in lenses that we got compared to another company. There was something even down to just holding them was slight. You knew that optically that was going to be better. Those 9 weeks we just rattled through loads of tests, and we ended up with Beastgrip. And the first challenge with it was, the adapter was an EF mount. So we at Arry Rental in Uxbridge, that's where we were based for 9 weeks. That's where most of the the film was basically 3 parts. It's Apple phones, Beastgrip, and Arry Rental. So we went through, the EF. They don't carry that many EF lenses, and especially ADM wanted to shoot anamorphic. You're down to the nanomorphs, and we wanted 2 sets of those. They only had 1 set, so we ended up chopping the EF mount off. Sorry, Vadim.
No, it's
And
good. I have one.
yeah, and the guys at Arry Rental chopped off the EF mount. We put a PL on, and that sort of opened up the world to PL anamorphics. Various lens tests later, we looked at, different brands. We ended up with Atlases, and that made sense because the adapter was full frame and your lenses were full frame. So we could get the 76-to-1 ratio. Myself, Danny, and ADM would go to Battersea Power Station Cinema. It's a rather posh place, really nice cinema, and watch all the camera tests that we had done. And there was just a little bit of retail space left and right. And ADM said, "Let's push that out further. What would that be?" And it would be 276-to-1, and that's what we went with. And that's sort of how the ball started rolling, really. you know, people may pick up that the adapter, your lenses are 1.5 squeeze. But we actually settled with the 1.3 squeeze from Beastgrip. The 1.5 seemed a little bit too bendy for ADM. So we kind of mixed squeezes, and we had spherical as well. We had a Canon K35 zoom, 25 to 120. And that was sort of our core package. The Atlases had just come out as well and purchased by Arri Rentals. So we had a 36-42 and a 54 to start off with. 2 sets of those for A and B cameras. And then later on down the line, we got a 72 and a 95. Forgive me if those focal lengths are wrong. This was last year or whenever it was.
That's all perfectly accurate. Yeah, we worked closely with Arri Rental and especially Simon
He
Surtees
is
over
the
there to
man.
make.
Simon Surtees is the man. He is the one that got ADM onto those lenses. They were sitting there as like, why don't we try these? And ADM fell in love instantly. It did everything that he wanted to do. We had some crazy ideas of putting 1.3 adapters onto, iron glass, Helios, lenses. And that is a very ADM thing to do. He is an innovator. He does things, completely differently in a good way. It's not just the bog standard set, but the problem with that was we were going away on location for 11 weeks. We'd have to carry more adapters, front adapters for these lenses. We couldn't get 2 sets, things like that. So he loved the look of the Atlases. So it made sense to us to go that way, to try and keep a low profile of equipment. Because that was the idea. That was one of Danny's things. We're going into locations that in the film, everything's overgrown. Everything's 28 years later. So we had to keep our equipment to a minimum, even though there were 55 cameras, even though we had the 20 cam rig and the 8 camera rig and 3 studio cameras and cameras that we could put on the floor or rig onto the actors or give them to run around with. You could just wheel stuff in with little carts. The grip equipment was light, so it made sense to go with your lenses, 2 sets of those, 3 of each, and then just have 2 floaty tighter lenses that the B camera would take over, to a different location and shooting back or whatever. But a lot of it was like I said earlier, very ironic hark back to 28 days using cinematic lenses and an adapter on a prosumer piece of equipment. Yeah, it's quite funny.
Very inspiring. I can't imagine organizing 55 cameras, even if they're professional cinema cameras, and keeping track of, which camera is which camera ID. Can you talk to us a little bit about how you were able to get that workflow going and keep things organized and functional on the back end and keep track of all those cameras?
Yeah, so my second AC, George Pedal, he is all over that. My team worked unbelievably hard. They are the best. We had Ben Fote as B camera, focus puller. George, who was my loader, as I mentioned, Saskia Deadman as the B second AC, and we had another second AC called Ben Roberts, who dealt with what we called the bar cam, that time slice, poor man's bullet time rig. And we had 2 trainees, Nia, Berry, and Amos. So that was my camera team, and George made sure, all the IDs were correct. God knows what we got to in alphabetical, I'm sure it was double, triple at some stages. And we had Jim Knight, who was our DIT, who was incredible. I brought him on I'd worked with him on a previous job, and I knew Jim and ADM would get on really well. So the three of us, Jim, Knight, myself, and ADM, we had those 9 weeks prep or R&D or whatever you want to call it, and then the other guys came on board to get their 3 weeks later on down the line. But yeah, as you can imagine, 55 cameras. If there was Super 35 format, I mean, you'd still be prepping it now. you know, it, the way that you've got to work with Danny and ADM is low profile, small full footprint, and getting stuff in quickly as possible. We were shooting 6 cameras minimum, 14 maximum it got to one day. It takes, there's a lot of, it's quite psychological, but the thing is with ADM and Danny, if you have past experience with them, you know what to expect. And that's, from a first AC's point of view. And as you're learning the film language, I can say to George and the team, it's going to be 2 cameras here, 2 adapter modes, and we'll have the consumer modes, which were the screw-in lenses. We're going to have a couple of those. So get those rigged up, get the SSDs on, get the video transmitters all working, and we'll just fly them in because they won't wait. Danny won't wait. So if we can fly them in quickly, set up a frame, approval by ADM, then we've got, a 4th, 5th, 6th angle, which Danny loves. He loves to edit, so he's got more to choose from, and that's what it's about. It's having the right team to support you. It's carnage, don't get me wrong, but it's, it's good fun, and I'm framing up stuff, and I know what ADM likes. He likes a Dutch, so I'm doing all of that, and you've got a good grip team rigging it to the floor or putting them up to, the infected to run around with. But as you like I said, as you're learning the film language, you kind of know what to expect for that scene. In quieter scenes, it's going to be 2 cameras, but if you've got a day with the infected running around and Aaron Taylor Johnson running around, then it's a multi-camera day and it's going to be a workout.
Yeah.
You know.
No, like when I watched it second time again, I was trying to pay as much attention as I can about like framing, trying to guess what lenses, and it's crazy. It's like happening so fast. I was exhausted second time watching just to trying to focus so hard. But yeah, I can't wait until it's gonna be available on streaming platforms because I'm gonna spend the whole day just kind of trying to pick it apart because it's a lot of inspiration and it's a lot of it's like a learning for somebody who's just starting or like shooting with iPhone or even with any camera. It's just so creative and dynamic, and I just love it. I love how it changes from that to that. I know that there is a lot of like mixed reviews about the film, but to me personally, I don't love like standard kind of boring, films that.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. As Dan said, 28 days. It was a prosumer camera that. I mean, yeah, okay, fine. They had one that had an adapter that you could put cinema lenses on, but if you just bought that Canon XL one with its fixed zoom lens, which I think had on it, right? And as you said, you could go. It proved that you didn't need film format. Digital hadn't even been invented then. That you could go and buy this camera and go and shoot your own films. That is a real Danny thing to do, and I feel that this film, in context, about the camera equipment, does the same thing. It shows that you can get your prosumer stuff from Beastgrip, you can get your screw-in lenses and your adapters. Yeah, okay, you may have to hire in some fancy glass from Atlas or whoever, but it shows that you can do it, and that's one of the things I think they like doing is sort of bending the rules on Hollywood, and you mentioned the look about the film. Danny cuts very quickly. ADM loves multi-format. Yeah, it was all the same iPhones, apart from one scene, which is all the infrared stuff. That was on a Panasonic camera, because we did ask Apple if we could take the IR filter out, and that was a major. So
You can.
we got these Panasonic
You can
cameras
with
in.
it. But you have to kind of destroy your iPhone technically. Yeah. So it's not that
Yeah,
easy.
which I don't think they were. I don't think they were willing to do that. Uh,
But why?
yes, yeah, exactly. But so ADM shoots multi-format. So in this particular case, how are you going to do that when it's all one single sensor, as it were? Well, you mix up the two modes. You've got the adapter mode that takes the PL lenses, and you've got the consumer mode that takes in the screw-in lenses. So you're watching the film, it does change, but that's what the film's about. I mean, not in story terms, but in in cinematography terms, that's what that's what he does best.
Yeah. No,
Um,
and I love because
yeah.
again, I'm looking, when I know it was shot on iPhone, of course, I wanted to guess what lens used where. That's what I do. Uh, and yes, I could notice this changes in image, but I would say the biggest change that kind of noticeable was from using those telescopes or spotting scopes, because couple shots they were in trailer and I was questioning myself like, okay, is it my DOF adapter? Because it's kind of blurry and so much aberrations and everything. But then I think I found those photos, and I could see that big white, telescope looking thing somewhere. So I was like, yeah, probably it's not lens, because there are like small, not small, but that type of smartphone lenses that kind of have a big zoom, and they kind of look this way. You have a lot of distortion, it's blurry, it's getting a lot of chromatic aberration, but that's that's what I could tell right away. But in my view, it was intentionally, because it's like really long and compressed shot. It's almost like somebody's watching them leaving the island, and then walking on the shore. So in my view, that was like the purpose of showing it this way. I think that's what I.
So so the teles. So here's the thing with with our adapter mode. We had the 95mm prime as our tightest lens. We had the zoom, the K35 zoom. Even with a 2x extender on it, it still wasn't long enough. And ADM had this idea about the Alpha chasing Aaron Taylor Johnson and Alfie, who plays Spike. And he called me up one day and he said, I need a seriously long lens. And I'm thinking, okay, what is available? Because I can't get a PL lens that's long enough, because there was weird vignetting going on, that you wouldn't expect on such a tight lens. That was the first thing. And so I came across this telescope, which on the advert it said it could take a photograph of the Milky Way. And you mentioned about the look and you were worried about your adapter, but ADM, you've got to get in his head as a first AC, right? It's those aberrations are what he loves, and what that lens did is that adds a look, the stamp of 28 days. That is a signature type of look for 28 years later. So we came across this telescope, and it pulled backwards. It had a tiny little knob on it, and it became one of Danny's favorite lenses. It was bizarre, but I totally get what you're saying, but it added something so magical to the film process. You know what ADM was trying to photograph. You know those aberrations, that weird texture. You know all the kind of you know the heat coming off. You know you can see it's beautiful. It's what it's about. You know it's the mini DV camera. What it did was create a post-apocalyptic London that no one had done before, you know, and other TV shows and films had copied that format. So this lens, this funny little telescope, which turned into what could be almost a 2000 mil lens, became a kind of thing of the. It was used quite a lot, you know. Um, Tough to pull focus on, but that was part of the fun, you know. Danny loved it, ADM loved it. It was great,
Yeah.
you know.
No, when I saw that, for me it was like it was done on purpose, you know, because I mean, maybe not on purpose, but you have to go after that look and like it just to use it, you know. It's not like, okay, we don't have anything else, we just gonna use that shot because that's what it is. Because like, again, for me, I thought about that it was intentionally, and I'm not saying it was taking my, you know, taking me away from film on anyways. It just something that caught my eye that I could see right away. And yes, you're right. When I think it was used in Bone Temple, where it's like tight close up of skulls, and then when Isla was holding baby, I think it's like some of the shots when she's holding baby in her hands in Bone Temple.
Yes. So Bone Temple, when we got to the Bone Temple, we were running cranes and we had the adapter with the atlases on and the K35 zoom. And then at night we used atlases. The telescope was used for the causeway where the first Alpha's running towards or chasing Aaron Taylor Johnson and Alfie before he gets hit by the
Uh-huh.
fire arrow. You know, so that we used that then. We used it a lot down what I called the LA Basin, which is where all the the Norwegian soldiers
Mhm.
drop into, start firing off, and all the infected start running. We had it then, and also in the field, the sort of yellow poppy
Mhm.
rapeseed field. We had it out then as well. Yeah. So any kind of long lensy. Oh, and uh, when the doors open as they leave the causeway, leave their holy island and head out onto the causeway. We used it then. Yeah. Um, I mean, there'll be definitely other times, but it just didn't make the film. You know, there's scenes that don't make the film.
Okay.
You know, so
Yeah.
yeah.
Uh, uh, did you guys use like only main camera on iPhone or try to use telecamera or just 24 millimeter wide camera?
Sorry, just say that again.
On iPhone, you use just the main 24 millimeter camera. You didn't use a 3x or ultra wide.
Yeah, we looked at all of that and we decided that firstly, the 24 mil had the best megapixels, which was something like 48. Um, and as you either went wider or tighter, you would drop down or whatever significantly. Um, and what so to sort of get the vignetting from the ground glass away, we had to push into like something like 1.3 digitally on the Blackmagic app, which is what we used to shoot the film. So using that digital push-in versus a 72 mil lens or whatever iPhone lens, it made no difference. So we decided to keep, and also it would get so confusing. You know, if you're running 14 whatever amount of cameras or the time slice ones and they're all at different, you know, iPhone lens, I mean, it would just explode your head. So I said to ADM, let's pick one lens it will give you the best resolution that the iPhone can do. We'll work from there. So that was the majority lens that we did, and worked well with the adapter and the screw-in lenses. Like I said, we pushed in digitally to avoid the vignetting, which I guess you guys have solved now, because you guys have got you don't have the ground glass in anymore. But and then with the screw-in lens, the 1.3 screw-in lens, it's one focal length, whatever that may be. So Danny wants to go tighter, 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 tighter. And like I said, you can only get to a 95, or, the Canon K35 with a 2x extension on it. He wants to go tighter even more. That's why the telescope got introduced. But when we're in consumer mode with a screw-in lens, we had worked out that our maximum push on the unknown sensor size, iPhone sensor size, was 2x. But yeah, you're going to get aberrations, you're going to get breakup and all that, ADM just embraces that. There was one particular person that was a bit worried, but, whatever. It's part of that, franchise, isn't it? So, yeah, we stuck with that. The only time that we ever shot with a different lens size was there's a whole sequence in the film where I think, so they're in the house before it falls down. Alfie's asleep and he's having these sort of visions or dreams
Mhm.
of his mum in the water. It's all black and white, I think. Is that right? Or is it?
It's
Or is did they?
in red colors.
Yeah. So they graded that later on. And
Okay.
what ADM wanted to do was shoot wide and close to have maximum depth of field. So we had figured out that we could use that lens to achieve that. And we used the front lens of the phone on the causeway where the arrows go flying over the two characters and hitting the alpha. ADM
Mhm.
placed it on the surface of the water, looking back up. So
Okay.
at least he could, he could see the frame on the screen, and looking back up. So those are the only times, really. But yeah, 24 mil
Okay.
mostly.
Cool. Yeah, when I saw that big rig, I wanna touch on that because it was first set of images that released with AGN article, and that one huge rig. Uh, I have a question: how you guys controlled all 20 cameras? It's like each camera you have to go and set it up separately, trigger it separately, like everything.
Yeah, yeah,
That's a lot
yeah.
of work.
Yes, you've got about 0.5 seconds before Danny's screaming turnover. I mean, so we call it the bar cam. We've had the similar setup, but we had Canon stills cameras on uh, a long format show called Pistols, which was a thing that
Mm-hmm.
Danny and ADM did, and it was 20 stills cameras all firing off for when Sid Vicious, punches someone or plays jumps off the amp with his bass. It became a kind of Danny signature shot. So uh we brought that onto he brought that on to 28 years later. And yeah, how did we control it? Well, like you said, I mean, I would be on the left wing, and Ben Folk, my B camera focus puller, be on the right, and we would just sort of meet in the middle. And I did speak to Apple about trying to get control of it, like an array, like a visual effects array that has a master in the middle, and then that syncs all the other cameras together for focus, for turnover, for all the settings. But 9 weeks, they can't write that kind of metadata or whatever formula, the ones and zeros, to create that app. They can't. It takes God knows how long to do that, and it's not going to be 9 weeks. So
They
about
need 28 weeks.
yeah, exactly. There you go. So about I'd say about halfway maybe 3/4 of the way through, John Carr from Apple sent Jim Knight this beta program. I can't remember what it was called. Maybe it's not Apple Play, but it's Apple something or other. And it was all controlled from an iPad that it could do 4 cameras.
Mm-hmm.
I think
Okay.
it's
It's
Apple Multi-View or something.
Final Cut camera app, and Final Cut on iPad allows you to control 4 cameras. Maybe
Yeah, it was
Blackmagic also has something like that, like
yeah,
remote control.
they didn't, unfortunately. I mean, what they did was like, add more settings to us, and because it was very basic, that app. Um,
Leading edge. I mean, you guys were the first to deploy all this stuff this way. So
yeah, and I will finish this question. So ask me about that because it's kind of interesting about that Blackmagic thing. But anyway, Apple had created this 4 screen controller on an iPad, but you needed Wi-Fi. You're in the middle of like God knows where. You've got a Wi-Fi guy, but it takes half an hour to fire up his truck. It just doesn't work on a Danny Boyle shoot. It does not work, that kind of system. And by the time that even if it did work, by the time you've done the 4th one, you could have done 12 by yourself. So we decided against that, and it was all manual, and it had to be done quickly. But like I said, we had a second AC and a trainee attached to those rigs, so with a rigging grip that could set it all up, and they did that every morning, set it all up. And when I knew that it was coming closer to the time, this is going to be the settings. We're all going to be at 48 frames. We're going to be at 36.2 degree shutter. We're going to be at this ASA, whatever. Get the glimmer glasses on, get the variable ND on, and it flies in, because you can't pin Danny into a corner of saying, when will these rigs be needed? They've just got to be ready. That's how sufficient it's got to be. So they did it every day. Yeah. And they just flew in, and we just did our thing. And if there was a problem, Danny would understand. But, as long as it's there on set and we're doing it and it's not, out of eyesight, that's the most important thing.
did you use a clapper to synchronize all those, or did they just figure that out in post-production?
I'm sure. Yeah, I do. So it's the same post people from Pistols. So when they heard about 20 iPhones on one rig and 8 on another, I mean, I think they just went, "Oh God, not again." So yes, George, my second AC, we had time coded slate, so all the cameras were then all time coded up. He did it, uh, that direction, and then that direction. And we just hoped to God it all worked, really. The only problem with it, which if I had more time, would be getting video picture for all 20. I mean, we had Vaxis, which were great because you could switch out channels super fast because we had multi-cameras everywhere. And I would jump from an adapter mode to a consumer mode and then back to another camera and another camera. So George would just dial that in and it would just, bing, the picture would come up. If someone could create, which I'm sure they have now, and even if at the time they didn't, I didn't know about it, was tiny little video transmitters that could get placed onto that rig. So lower the weight down, because it's all about weight with ADM, and then Danny can get a picture. And so we only had one transmitter, which was in the center, and the rest we just guessed. Basically, Jim Knight would just guess, the rest of the rig in exposure using the central one. I say guess, obviously it was an educated guess, and with focus, I'd have to explain to Danny that, because you're not quite cross shooting, but if your infected's coming deep to close, it's not going to hold all the way, with the focus dial on the Blackmagic app. So we had to sort of pick where he wanted it. And again, if it's infected running with a 20 camera rig, you've sort of got to set it to a place where you've looked at a rehearsal and then go, okay, let's hope this works. But the beauty of those things is that he can pick either cameras, 2, 4, 7, and 8 to get that, or do the full thing. And I think in the film, well, he told me the 20 camera rig only gets used once, which I think is when
In the train.
in the train when Chai comes down, he's ripped off Edwin's head, and then he comes down and
Yeah.
then boom, the head's in the center. And I saw that on the big screen, and I was like, "Fuck yeah, well, that's cool."
Yeah, but when I watched the film first time, I noticed use of that rig when they did like a first kill of big zombie. But then
Yeah.
when I watched it again, it was actually at the very beginning, uh, when those two zombie guys crawling, like when
Oh yes. Yeah.
Jimmy is
Yeah.
running to the church, right? It was so
Yes.
quick. I missed it
Yeah.
first time. But then
Yeah.
also when Isla arguing with Jamie that Spike is going to the mainland and she's screaming at him, it's also like super quick switch of
Yeah.
camera.
So that shot of the infected coming up to the church, that was called the 8-bar cam. That's the handheld version that ADM would have. I actually do have a photo of me and Danny on the floor looking at the screens. That was the first time it got used. And yes, you're right. When Jodie gets out of bed and she screams, we had that. That was the 8 as well. Yeah, it worked. I thought it was cool. It's different. And this is what's great with working in Danny and ADM is that they're artists, they're innovators, and I can't tell you the amount of people that have phoned me from commercial agencies, producers, wanting the inside scoop on that time slice for their next commercial, even an Apple one. It's like no, information doesn't come for free.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you because I believe you used teleconverter 1.7 because
Your one,
like small lens, like tele.
well, we had the Atlases that went up to 95 mil, and then we had the Canon K35 zoom in
Yeah, but
PL. So that was our
yeah, I'm asking about like small lenses.
yeah.
Because I think you use that because on some shots I could see like very warm amber flare in the corner. That's what usually like our 1.7x lens produces. So that's why I'm just wondering if you guys used it, because to me that looked like that lens.
Do you remember what scene it was? Because I might be
Yeah,
able to.
yeah. So first time it was when is running down the stairs from mom's bedroom, and it's like when camera pans just a little bit, there is like that warm flare goes to the bottom of the right corner.
Oh yes. Okay, yeah.
And then when Eric is carrying Isla and Spike is walking and they talk about like delivery driver and all of that.
Oh yeah.
So I also could see like that flare in a lot of those shots.
I'm sure we used the 1.3 squeezed lens and maybe just digitally pushed in. I don't think we did have a 1.7 like your tele lens. I don't I don't remember using it for that. But ADM likes to throw in a backlight, so maybe that's what it was. And the scene in the forest when they're talking about the delivery drivers and all that kind of business, that was on that, I'm sure, was again 1.3 squeeze on a Ronin. We had a little Ronin. The guys, Dan Lopo Perez here, DLP remotes. Him and Andre, his tech, came up with putting it on there and stuff. So, yeah, I'm sure it was 1.3, maybe. Yeah.
Yeah, I have to rewatch it because I was. The reason I'm asking you is because even on when you use those small lenses, there is like a deep focus with iPhone, and those lenses they're not giving you that much shallow depth of field unless you get in really close. But even in those scenes when he's carrying mom and they talking, I can see how focus switching between Spike and him. And I'm just wondering, you used like Tilta with Black Magic to control that focus?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that was one of the core reasons to go with Blackmagic, is that you could, use the Tilter Nano. I'd contacted Tilter here, who then put me forward to Yang in the States, and he basically sent me a goodie box of various stuff on the Kronos series. And by the time, though, that came, we had already picked the cages and the adapters and all this business, and the handles and things like that. And I didn't have time to really kind of bastardize the two together, to try and get a really good outfit for ADM. But
It's
anyway, this Nano
okay.
thing,
It's okay.
uh, um, but that's what you got to do with him. You've got to sort of collect all this sort of stuff and pick the best thing, and it's time as well, So, but anyway, yeah, the Nano thing worked. You just had to be really close,
Yeah.
I mean, it's almost
To
like
see the difference.
yeah, it's almost like using a follow focus. That's how close you got to be, and Ben Fote, my B camera focus puller, he looked into boosters, but nothing was working. And we thought about Wi-Fi, but then, like I said, we're out in the middle of nowhere. It's never gonna, someone could jump on it, or we get disconnected. It would just be a disaster. So yeah, to the ability to have focus, obviously you'd get on a Atlas lens, which is really important for ADM for storytelling. And it was like, how am I going to do this on a consumer setup, with the Beastgrip screw-in lens and the tilter? It worked. You could get focus racks. You just had to be close. Otherwise,
Yeah.
it became really juddery, and you just got, and obviously for that scene, there's different. They're placed all in different places, so they have dialogue. So you have to go with the dialogue with focus, because Danny could just use one shot. That's it, and he's got the scene. He doesn't need to intercut and things like that, So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, because I also really liked it's a lot of those close-up shots with dialogues when you have like when they talk in the house, and then when Spike and Jamie they went to the big land, and it's like shot from the back and they both standing, and it's like super tight shot. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, that specific shot was with wide lens. And the reason I'm asking because I'm looking for like any signs that I can guess, and usually flares, because I know how our lenses flare, which color in which scenario, how it looks, And I could see when Spike goes in the middle of the frame, there is like a green flare coming, like couple, just few spots that usually what we see with our wide lens. So that's why I'm wondering, for those close-ups, did you use like anamorphics or not? Because our anamorphic cannot really focus close enough. You have to be at least like 3 feet away. And those close-ups, they were really tight. So that's why I was thinking it's either teleconverter or white converter, or maybe there is no lens at all, because it's hard to tell when those framing, you don't have any reference point to see distortion or not. It's really hard to guess.
Is this the scene in the Bone Temple at night? Is that the one you're describing?
No, when they just got to the main land and they standing and looking at the view, and it's like back shot. So they both standing, and it's really tight shot, and they kind of
And
have
it
short conversation.
and this is when the slow-lo appears. Is that right? Is that the first time? Is that the first kill shot he does? Is that it?
It's before that, and then they start walking, and they get to the forest, I guess. So
Yeah. Um. I mean, yeah. I mean, look. So by default, it was going to be, it's anamorphic, and like you said, the 1.3 squeeze lens, we had worked out that you could get 1.6 out of it.
did you use diopters?
We had 77mm Tiffin diopters, which aren't really diopters. I think they're just called close-up filters. So what we would do in that scenario is switch to an Atlas lens to be able to get a proper diopter in if we needed to. I mean, the Atlas lenses are pretty good on, for anamorphics, they're pretty good on close focus. The wides are like, 1.6, and I think the 72 is 3 foot, something like that. And I think for, those sort of important dialogue moments, we'd go with Atlas, but I can't specifically remember that shot. Mostly we were with either, our proper PL lenses or the 1.3 Beastgrip, and then what we'd do is we'd just digitally push in. I think maybe we might have used a wide lens for rigging it on the floor or whatever, but each camera package had a set of 1.3, your telly, and the wide, and I think we had a couple of macros as well,
Okay.
but I can't
No.
specifically remember that shot.
Yeah. No, I can imagine, because it's so many cameras you can really remember each take. It just again, I'm just obsessed looking for signs to kind of recognize what type of
Yeah,
lens
sure.
was used. And yeah, but what I like about that, it's just because of the framing and everything, it all comes together so nicely, because usually I can guess right away, but it's, for me, I had a hard time, unless it's a flare that can I can say what type of flare is that. Even though I was confused, and I asked you when we had a call a couple days ago if you used that prototypes. So I rewatched it again, on Tuesday, and I know, because I mentioned that scene in Bone Temple when it's like a night, and it's hard to tell. It's like it looks really like nice and detailed, because yeah. But more than that, once like they hide in that hole, whatever, from in Bone Temple, like in the morning when that Samson Alpha,
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
forgot.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he was running through the Bone Temple, and you can see that Atlas flare,
Yes.
going. And it did look so clean. So I couldn't believe it's like there is a ground glass. It just clean, That's why I was like, I can't believe it looks so clean. I cannot see any texture. But then you told me, no, you guys didn't use that prototypes. And I got back to the office, and I started testing, like, can I see the same character or flare? Because adapter itself gives additional flares. There is like a
Mm.
filter that has like this blue coating, and you can see very like specific, circular flares that is not from Atlas lens, but it goes from the adapter. And I was able to recreate that flare, and it was also clean. I couldn't see the texture, towards the sides. So this way, yeah, I was confused, because I was like, okay, that's too clean. That's too, too sharp. I cannot tell any. And to be fair, it's happening so fast. We can't
Yeah.
really pause in the theater
Yeah.
to really analyze. But
I
yeah,
mean, I worked out quite quickly that iPhone filmmaking is confusing. It's not, it's not the film, it's not the rule book that you've learned on a Panaflex or an Ariflex, or 435 or whatever, or an Alexa. Everything is backwards, and not everything makes sense. So you're then coming down to the look of things. And there were days that, like you said, it was, you'd get a clean image of like, that shot of the tree and all the infected run up, and and the big alpha that was on the
Mhm.
K35 zoom. That's pretty clean. I was quite amazed at the big screen seeing that. Or you see stuff where it's backlit and you can see the texture of the ground glass. And again, ADM, he embraces all of that. That is his signature kind of style. Or you're using a wonderful Atlas lens on Alfie close up with a Revar diopter as he's sort of tripping out whilst Dr.
Mhm.
Kelson has done the blow dart on him, and you've got all the fire going around him, and it's all really trippy and dreamy, and that's, yeah, you've got the Revar on, but you can still get a sense of it being clean, and the close-ups of Jodie are clean at night. I'm sure it's down to it'll be down to lighting setup and what
Yeah.
ADM did in the grade. 100%.
Yeah, because so when you have those hot spots, and contrast between, because usually you can see if you have a bokeh and it's like really bright and then it starts to bleed, when you start to see texture. When it's all like diffused and evenly lit, it looks really beautiful. So yeah, but
Yeah, I mean,
And
sorry, Dan, go on.
no, go ahead, you first.
No, go on. I've been waffling on too much. Go on.
I was just going to say, to your point, that they say human visual response is attuned to somewhere between a 5 micron and 10 micron spot size. And, with film, that's generally what we're getting is, 5 to 12, something like that. And so if you're able to, if you're the pitch on your ground glass is somewhere around that, then the iPhone re-imaging that, it will basically be imperceptible or, very pleasing to the human eye when we see it. So it might be that you've attuned it really nicely to the way that, human beings receive these images and kind of perceive them.
yeah.
And that's something kind of neat about the ground glass and the way you build the system.
Yeah, with that ground glass, it's not the actual diffuser part which causing the issues. It's a Fresnel lens because of raw engravings. That's what causing the issue. And again, sometimes it's not noticeable depending on the light. It's not like a stable thing that you can predict, and prepare each time. Every time it's surprise, now you have this look. But there are creators who really embrace a lot of, like, I was shooting with, not shooting, but was president one shoot for the short film, the guy from New York. So he loves all the weird stuff that's going on with DOF. He's like, okay, I just love that look. I love, like, not distortion, but it's getting soft over the edges. With some lenses, he's getting vignette, but he's like, yeah, I love that stuff. Then I can crop in 4:3 or whatever, even put additional stuff just to make it look not like an iPhone and not like any other camera. Is so people question, okay, how it was done, because something was done to that image, and it's kind of weird, but for many people it looks beautiful and they just love that stuff and they trying to utilize it as much as possible. So
The unique process and a unique voice that people can find with these tools.
yeah, so it's in any way it's not a perfect tool, but it still allows you to achieve like results that you would not be able to achieve with iPhone. Let's say it this way. Without that, yes, you can use conversion lenses. Optically, they are better, but you have limitations. You can't really pull focus much unless you're really close to something. You can't, do much. You have fixed look. You can adjust it a bit, but with adapters, you can try different lenses, and it's like the whole kind of set of different lenses is available to try and see what look is good for you or not, and it just opens up more possibilities to use iPhone. So I'm obsessed with
And
that.
Spooky, that's really cool. Spooky, I have a follow-up question too. After closing this chapter of your filmmaking career, if you were to ask Apple or Beastgrip or Atlas or Blackmagic Design to change something about any of the things that we do that made up your tool set for this movie. So if you had to go back and do another movie based on what you've experienced and what you've learned, what would you ask us to change or to make for you to make your life
Yes.
easier or more free or more enjoyable?
I would ask Apple for the latest phone personally as a gift, and I'd probably ask Beastgrip for the same because we gave you some good business, man, and we didn't even get a T-shirt. Um, so you know what? John Carr came to set one day, and he was telling me his sort of plans with it. Um, I think there's a lot to what I had created, you know, with ADM is, you know, a Mark 1 in term, as soon as we started shooting, I was inundated with other companies with different lenses and different cages. This thing is always going to be evolving, and I think it would be very hard to pin down what would be better because what we did then is good for then. For now, I'm not entirely sure. I think in terms of, you know, maybe I'll work backwards on this. Atlases are great lenses. I mean, they are fantastic, and they are very popular here at the moment. There's a lot of people using them, and for good reason. Um, for me, pulling focus on them is great. There's no issues there at all, and they're robust. And I mean, not that we throw them around, but they do the job. They're small, they're lightweight. These things tick the boxes for an ADM shoot, and I'm sure he will use them again if he's going to film, um, his next project in anamorphic. He loved them. He really did love them. I would say in terms of accessories, or what could be evolved there is, like I mentioned, we had the 1:3 squeeze anamorphic, but it's one focal length and we had to digitally zoom in. What would be, if you really want to go all out on it, is create, a set of lenses, that screw in. And the tele lens isn't really telly. It's probably more of like a 40 mil in spherical terms, So, if you want, because look, I won't, I won't mention their names, but certain DPs probably would turn their nose up against the iPhone because of the resolution. If they could actually shoot 4K, that's obviously the first thing. I think what we did was 422 HQ, I think was the highest that we could do or something. So if they could do a phone that would be in the same playing field as a Super 35 digital Alexa camera sensor, whatever, 4.8K, 4.5K, whatever, then you've entered that into the big party. You could use those on Apple, Marvel films and what have you. It's the resolution that's the biggest problem for visual effects. I mean, my God, I mean, he must have had a nightmare, Adam Gascoigne. But in terms of lenses, if there was a set, that actually were spherical and anamorphic, that you could keep the same digital zoom, let's call it 1 times or 1.1 times, keep it the same, keep it as the biggest you can with the res and the sensor size and have different focal lengths, then that is really cool. The other thing would be tilter. I mean, it was really great, but if they could update or somehow within Blackmagic have a booster on things like that to pull focus, it's, all these little things, they all add to making a film. You've got to, if you're going to release stuff and play with rental houses and film productions, you've got to enter their league. There's no way that a Marvel or whatever feature film would have an iPhone, because they can't do the res. So they've got to be honest with what that is, and I'm sure it's all possible. For me, it would be lenses. You guys obviously have focal lengths, and do you have a zoom yet for the Atlases? Do you have a zoom lens?
Oh, I'm glad you asked. That's something that we're actively working
Yeah.
on. And so, as a former cinematographer myself, some of my favorite lenses to use are things like the Bailey zoom from
Yeah.
Panavision. I think that family of zooms is absolutely
Yeah.
incredible. So that's kind of like made up of two times lenses. One that's a 70 to
Yeah.
200, and then like a 37 to an 80. I don't know if you've had a chance to work with those, but they're pretty nice. That's named after John Bailey, ASC,
Yeah,
BSC, I
from
think.
Panavision, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, the AWZ and the ATZ. Yeah, I mean, they get used all the time. I mean, the Hubble I've had out on jobs before, which is, with a 3-to-1. The obvious, but that's spherical though. But yours are still anamorphic. Will it be in that?
We focus on anamorphic lenses here. That's
Yeah.
kind of our primary sphere, pun
Yes. Yes.
intended. Um, but yeah, that's sort of our main focus. So, knowing what people like yourselves and ADM would like to use are, influential in the way that we pursue our focus on what we're
Yeah.
developing.
I mean, the only reason why I said anamorphic uh zooms to you guys was because, sometimes if you're shooting an anamorphic picture and you want a super long lens that is longer than, those zooms that you mentioned, you'll just go spherical and still have the 2:3:9 aspect ratio. No one will ever know, And I just wondered if you're kind of following the same suit, if it were. But
It's the longest Atlas Prime that we make right now is an Orion Series
mhm.
200 mil. And you could, of course, stack that with a doubler or our 1.6 extender and have something like a 330 millimeter or 200 millimeter or 400 millimeter, I
Yeah.
should say. That ends up being pretty out there for a front
Yeah. Yeah.
anamorphic,
Yeah.
but um, certainly the convenience of zooms, being able to change focal length while you're working, even if you use it as a variable prime, if you're not zooming in the shot, is so convenient and helps you work
Yes,
quickly.
absolutely. Yeah. No, it's great that you guys are doing that. I've always been a bit wary of putting doublers and whatever expanders and extenders on primes, because on anamorphics, they just don't bite, and you could spend weeks trying to find one, and it's a bit of a nightmare, really, as I'm sure you know. So, but yeah, in terms of screw-in lenses, if there was a set that you could do that keeps the same, uh, you know, sensor size, if you want to call it that, on the iPhone, that helps out. That would help out
Yeah.
other DPs, I'm sure. ADM embraces all of it. So all those aberrations, things like that, it doesn't bother him. It all adds to the look. We're talking about
Yeah.
28 years later. We're not talking about, you know, June,
Yeah.
where that would be a problem, if you see what I mean. So
Yeah, that's the thing, because like our main customer base is, just consumers. And for
yeah,
them, you're trying to create lens that is sharp and there is a lot of details, because I think the part of the problem is people used to that over sharpened look coming from smartphones. And now when they see that lens adds something, even a little bit, that's okay, that's a bad lens. That's feedback from consumer side who just getting started with that stuff, And even why we did 1.7 is not really a tele lens. Yeah, you are correct. It's like about 40 millimeter focal length equivalent, The problem is it's really hard to create for modern iPhone cameras or even Android cameras lens that will have more magnification and still gonna give you like optimal performance towards the size of the frame. So we had 3x before, then we scaled down to 2x with advancement of iPhone cameras, and the last one 1.7x. It just good in terms of optical performance, and it's still not that complex, because I mean it's possible to build like whatever lens, it's just gonna cost so much that consumer not gonna buy that stuff.
Yeah,
So
I mean,
that's a challenge that we have all the time.
yeah. I mean, you're trying to keep up with Apple or other non-fruit based devices, um, you know, and that's got to be quite difficult. And but with Dan, obviously, your world is, and don't take this wrongly, it's your world's proper cameras, proper normal, so people like the atlases, and then you're going to develop, like you said, the zooms and things like that, and then people start using those. And I mean, when I was prepping this film, there was another picture using your set of lenses, quite a big DP. I'm sure you know who he is. And I thought, isn't that interesting that he's got the same set of lenses as we've got, and one's on a Super 35, Alexa 35, and we've got an iPhone with the same thing. And they'll give two very different looks. And that's what those DPs are, two very different, but, it's, but using the same glass. I thought that was quite funny.
I mean, I think that's what excites us the most, is empowering people to tell their best story and make their best images. And that's, that has such a variety to it. So, I mean, that's one of the reasons I'm so interested and fascinated with the way that, these devices can be modified or enhanced, because, we're in this for the long haul, for storytelling, for technology, for people, for artists. And so I'm really excited to see, even as someone even if my lens was not on the phone, I'm so excited for what's possible with these. And that's why I was curious about like what additional software tools or hardware tools would make your life better. Because I think, to your point, like if we think about just the bar cam rig, if you were able to easily synchronize those through the software and have one,
Trigger.
universal run
Yeah.
stop, even though it would maybe only save you 3 or 4 minutes in setup for the shot, that run stop would be a game changer and make your life easier, make the whole film quicker to make, and therefore you might be more apt to choose it. So I think that there's a lot of pioneering that can still be done, and I'm excited for
Yeah,
that.
I mean, what I was trying to sort of describe earlier was that, 28 years is such a sort of bespoke outfit that it'd be quite difficult to generalize this is what's got to happen in the iPhone, cinematic universe. It's quite, but the 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 key things are lenses, and like you said, camera control of, the bar cam. If I knew about this film last year, let's say 28 years, we're going to shoot it next year, and I knew about it now, I'd be straight on the phone to John Carr saying, "Can you make something?" And I'm sure that would give him enough lead time to do all of that, and that's what it is. It's lead time, 9 weeks. You can do your best, but yeah, camera control of all of that. But we had also Jim Knight and I, through John Carr, who talked to Blackmagic, had ripped apart a very basic app. You could only do 24 frames minimum, I believe. I think the highest was 60 or maybe 48. The shutter speeds weren't that exciting. And what you couldn't do was output in log, and you couldn't output the frame lines and things like that. So we had effectively, Jim and I had rebuilt the app, and we sent a whole list of stuff that needed to be done. And, a few days later, or a week later, it would be pinged across 55 iPhones on a flight application thing. It would all go off at once, and it would be uploaded. It took us 3 weeks to find what we named the infected shutter, which was a certain type of because a 45-degree 90 hard shutter on an iPhone is not going to be the same as on a 16mm camera, or 35, or a 35 sensor, or a 65mm sensor. It would be completely different. So we had to go with off shutter angles, like weird ones. I'm talking like 17.3. And it became more of a look than mathematical, physics of shutter angle plus speed equals this. So if they could, I don't know how you'd do it, but if you'd have your numbers the same as what you know is on a proper camera, then that would help out massively. That was a big challenge, trying to find that infected shutter. But yeah, remote triggering, things like that, because even with the tilter on a crane, I'd have to bring it back down every time, turn over, fire it back up. With my Preston handset, you can't trigger it remotely. I'd have to go to it and do it manually. I mean, it's not the end of the world. They did make me a box, but by that point we had 2 weeks left of shooting, so I never really tested it. But yeah, there's plenty of things. It just depends on what the film is. This film was completely different. It had a very bespoke thing that we had to create. So, and not all of that is going to transfer onto another production. It depends what you're doing. A lens is a lens at the end of the day. An Atlas lens can go on a iPhone, it could go on a whatever camera, and that's great, and it looks beautiful, and it photographs well, and the DP loved it, Anthony loved it. The smaller things that I had figured out during prep are sort of bespoke to that, but you could, all the things that I mentioned, if they could make that possible, that'd be great. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Last question I have, because I really want to know that when you use video feed from your rig, what type of hubs you guys used? Because I think that's number one issue right now with the hubs and powering device, recording to SSD, plus feeding the video out. So can you tell us what you used?
I'll give this away for free to any budding AC out there that's doing this thing. We use the Anchor Hub, USB-C Anchor Hub, very
Okay.
small. It's a small Anchor Hub that had like enough outputs and HDMI outputs and a PD output, to do what it needed to do. And I basically built a backpack system, which I called the flux capacitor, which you could run the cable down into the hub, which also powered the phone at the same time, so you could charge whilst shooting on location. That's, fantastic. So you could charge the phone and record the data at the same time through this one cable into the hub, and then out from there you'd have time code. We had Samsung T7 SSD drives that were rigid, and then an SDI HDMI to SDI converter box that went back up BNCs for an onboard monitor. Yeah, the Anchor hub was good, actually. Yeah, and again, and I tested God knows how many. They seem to be the best ones, and they were small, they were tiny, and that was perfect for ADM. Small is good, you know.
Yeah. No, that's good to know because, again, that's the issue right now because there is so much mixed feedback about different hubs, and we have the same experience with different hubs. It either works or not, is rapid
Yeah,
signal or not,
I mean,
and
put it,
everyone has that issue.
yeah, well, put it this way, on a kind of whole new outfit. I know films have been shot on the iPhone before, but this is obviously taking it to the next level. We're using anamorphic glass, on the adapters. We've got 55 cameras, that all need to be ready to go all at once. We had ones on Ronins, we had it on a crane. We had 3 mag errors and 3 cameras overheated in 11 weeks, and that's not bad for a first time shooting quite a big picture on that format, you know.
So you guys didn't use any external cooling, right? They've been running without like cooling pads or any fans, just iPhone in the cage, and
Yeah,
yeah,
that's it.
that's good.
Yeah, because I tried to use Tilter's fan on your cage, but it wouldn't have worked. Just I think it was down to spacing,
Yeah, yeah.
and uh, and I said to myself, these cameras will never overheat. And we had one overheat in Scotland, believe it or not, and it rains there all the time. So you know, um, uh, we had a couple go down in the Happy Eater when it explodes, but that's the way it goes. And I think, and hey, look, this is the beauty of shooting on an iPhone on the picture like this, is that you just swap the phone out. That's, if one overheats, you just swap it out real quick and no one notices and you can carry on shooting. And, Danny's
Yeah.
not waiting for another, you know, large format censored camera down at the truck because you could only bring 3 up to location because it was a 45-minute trek, to get to the location. You could bring a small footprint with all your cameras and the backup cameras and just swap it out if there was a problem. That's the great thing about it, you know speed and not holding the production up, you know.
Okay. Last question, promise.
Yeah.
So the first time you heard that you're gonna shoot on iPhone, what was your position at that time? And after you actually did the shoot, what is your position right now? Did it change in any way? It's because look, there is still a lot of negativity about shooting on iPhone or smartphone and all of that. But what is your like personal opinion on that stuff?
Yeah, I mean, when I went for a meeting with Danny and he outlined the film to me. This is what he wants to do. Uh, and ADM had told me on the phone previously he wants to shoot on iPhone, and I thought he was winding me up. I thought he was joking. But then when Danny told me, I thought, okay, this is now serious. And as he outlined his vision for the film and left, I turned around and I said to the producer, I need 9 weeks prep. I need to start now. And it was a headache, but the important thing is what is on the screen. At the end of the day, as a product, as a film, and I think what myself and my team and ADM had done and everyone else that worked on that picture is make a cool movie. I think it's great. I think what it does is ticks the boxes for the 28 Days fans, your Danny Boyle fans, your Anthony Dodd Mantle fans, and what do I think about it after? I think, as previously mentioned, there's so much you can do with it that it's almost endless. And it's, like I said, we had the Mark 1 version of what you can do. You can make a you could make a big production film on an iPhone. That's what you can do. that's what they did on 28 days. That's what they've done on 28 years. And if other productions want to shoot on the iPhone, uh, if they called me, of course I'd do it. It's just, I'd need to go back to the drawing board, because the knowledge and the experience that I had setting that all up for that job won't be the same for the next film. Things have changed. There's more cages out there. There's more lenses out there. There's more hubs. There's more cables. There's more this, that, and the other. And you just have to work with the DP and find the best solution, you know? And then, you know, with the app, what app do you want to go for? Do we go with a Blackmagic one? Okay, do you want to add more, you know, speeds, or, you know, can they add more resolution somehow? You know, now we're on, you know, we did the 15 Pro. I mean, the 17's coming out next month or
Yeah.
something, you know. Things are evolving so fast, you know. So yeah, I would, but you just need prep. You need sufficient time to do it. It's not like a camera that you know well, and a set of lenses, and go, okay, there's an A set and a B set and a couple of zooms, and you've got 3 bodies, and the third body's a steady cam, and, you know, that's us for the next 4 months. You know, iPhone's different. You got to think differently.
Yeah, that's true. Well said.
I have one
Yeah,
last. I have one last
yeah, of
question, if
course.
I may, and it's a 3.
Like this film.
Um, uh, First of all, I'm curious to hear how you first became involved in the motion picture industry, and this is to sort of give people who are at either the beginning of their career or thinking about how much they love movies, and how they might want to get started in making movies. If you could share a little bit about your beginnings in the industry. Uh, the second part would be, do you have any advice for anyone who is just starting out, or any advice for veteran filmmakers who find themselves in a difficult or challenging time, as conditions are always changing? And then the final part would be, if you feel comfortable, if you could share how you got your name,
It,
Spooky.
so, well, my surname's Churchyard. So, you know, ghosts in a churchyard with the gravestones, you know, so spooky. Yeah, that's British film industry humor for you. Um, my dad is a costume designer, so that's sort of how I got in, really. So he's Spooky Senior and I'm Spooky Junior, as per Wally Pfister said once. um, yeah, so I was very lucky. You know, I started at 17, 16, 17. I was a camera trainee, and I got in with a really good family of technicians, you know, through dad, they were all on the same film. And I just finished my college degree at 17, and next thing I know, I'm on a plane to Mexico to go and do a second unit of a film. And like, I was just like, fuck, this is amazing. And I kind of stayed with that family for the next couple of years on films, and, you know, went loading, you know, because it was 16 mil and 35, obviously, at the time, at 19. And I did 10 years as a clapper loader on various films, and, you know, went focusing at 29, and, you know, now I'm 40. So yeah, how I started was through dad, you know. And um, I know some people think that's nepotism, but that's sort of how it is, really, unfortunately. But anyone that wants to,
You way up from being a
yeah,
trainee.
yeah,
So
yeah,
you the time you put in the work, and that's the message I would share anyone out there is, it helps to know people, but if you don't know them, if you introduce yourself and come into the industry with a positive and humble attitude, and willing to learn, you'll go
yeah. I
far.
think, yeah, exactly that. And, you know, I think anyone that doesn't have that opportunity of a relative or their parents or whatever, you know, being in the industry, that is going to the rental house camera side, you know, and learning the equipment, and, you know, making friends with the guys at ARRI or CSC, or if they still exist out there, and, you know, Panavision, obviously. And, um, you know, working hard, and you'll get your break eventually, because test crews will be coming in prepping, and they may need a trainee, they may not have one, and that's your opportunity. But when I started, I did some work experience at Panavision, with Rob Waters, and I knew what a matte box was. I knew what a follow focus was. He taught me how to lace, the Panaflex, and taught me how to, load, and, the ins and outs of that camera, and what this is and what that does, and things like that. So when I first started my uh, job as a camera trainee, when they called out for a follow focus or a clip-on matte box, I knew exactly what that was, and it's important to know these things. Yeah, if you don't have the opportunity to, know someone and get onto set instantly, then going to the rental house is invaluable. Absolutely, yeah. And there was another question. Sorry, I can't remember.
Oh, what your advice would be for people who may be seasoned, or if they're just starting out in a time where things are constantly changing, any advice for them to either be adaptable or to survive in such a challenging
Yeah,
time?
I mean, it has been tough, hasn't it? We've had the SAG strikes and the writer strikes. I mean, that really killed a lot of people. Yeah, that was difficult. I mean, if you've got something to fall back on, then brilliant. I don't. This is all I know. So I'm. I, if you, I tell you what's funny is that there's a few, when the strikes happened, the camera trainees were like, "This is insane. I can't believe this is happening. How am I going to get any work?" And I'm like, "Yeah, it wasn't that long ago where you do one film a year. We're now in this kind of world where people do back-to-back jobs and go from TV, long format, to a film, and then another long format thing. And, this younger generation seem to think that's how it is. And if there's a strike or they don't get work, they can't quite work it out. And you've got to realize that it's not always going to be that busy, and if you're passionate enough and if you're hardworking, then you will continue the work. You just got to stick it out. It takes a long time. I know there's people that don't want to focus pull, and they just want to go straight into lighting. Uh, that's fine. You can go to a film school and do all that and shoot wide open. That's all fantastic. But you're not really understanding what your camera operator is doing, or your focus puller is doing, or what your loader's doing, or in fact, anyone on a film set. What that is the best school, is being on a film set. Being in a classroom, yeah, you can get your degree and that's all fantastic, but you don't know what people do, and these people can help you out as a cinematographer. From the runner to the prop man. You've got to know what people do. So if you can stick it out, that's great, and just soak in as much information, because what I learned through my focus pullers when I loaded for them, when you go focusing, it suddenly just comes to the front of your head. Ah, that's how he did it. This is how I'm going to achieve this shot. And then you can do it. You know, there's so much stuff that you can soak up that you probably don't even realize until you get into that situation, and you realize that's how someone else did it 10 years ago, 15 years ago. And still the same process. It's just slightly different, it's just a different camera.
I love that. We're all in
Yeah,
this
man.
together, and it's our role models who will help light the
Yeah,
way
yeah.
for
I
us.
mean,
So we
the,
we
you know,
we all
yeah, yeah.
nice.
The guys that, you know, I loaded for, one was Eamon O'Keefe, and, his IMDb is just so fantastic. And I learned so much from him, and, I still use those techniques today, and even when, loading for 10 years, you work with different focus pullers all the time. I mean, that's, um, yeah. that, you know, that's what Wally said to me on a film, is that, you know, work with as many people as possible, because you will bring all of that information in to when you move up to focusing or operating or whatever. You know, everyone's got slightly different things going on, but universally it's all the same, you know. And if you can keep reminding the newer generation about these guys and keep them, you know, with the stories and how they did things, and you're teaching them stuff of what they taught you, then you will learn something. What you won't learn, and what you won't have people won't have your back, is if you'll just come in and fresh and don't know what you do and just, you know, pretend like you know how to do it. You'll get caught out pretty quickly.
Thank you so much. It was really, really lovely
Yeah, you
speaking with
too.
you today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Spooky.
All right.
Thank you, Dan. Yeah, and for everyone who's watching again, I hope you guys like it. So please ask some questions, leave comments, subscribe. You know, I'm probably gonna put some links into the description to the video. So Spooky, if you want me to put some specific links, let me know.
Sure. Yeah.
You know, we'll post everything. So again, thank you guys. It was such a big pleasure for me. And
Thank you.
yeah, let's keep in touch.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
guys.
Email me your mailing address and we'll send you some goodies.
Yay! Yes. Vadim,
Let's
you're up
back
next.
it together.
You're next. You got to send us adapters and lenses and all sorts.
Yeah. Yeah,
All right,
we have
man.
new adapters.
There you go. Perfect.
Okay.
All right, guys. Thank you. Cheers. Nice one.
Thank you.
Thank you. See ya.